Hello and welcome to today's masterclass from the LCP portal. Today we're going to be in Learning Zone 1 with the Physical Activity Project, and more specifically we're going to be identifying and analysing skills and strategies of a sport, but you'll then be able to take these skills away and analyse skills and techniques from your chosen sport for your physical activity project. So the learning intentions for today, first off, for you to be able to correctly identify characteristics of skillful performances in your activity. Then we're going to take a look at strategical performances in your activity. And by the end, you'll be able to take that understanding and those tools to be able to sort of take a closer look at physiological and psychological attributes which might contribute to different levels of performance. So what makes a novice and an elite performer different in their physiological and psychological aspects, and then how is that reflected in their sporting competence? So we're going to get started straight away and look at, successful performances in your sport. So we know that effective skill execution is going to lead, more often than not, to a successful performance. Not all the time, because that brings into it, this idea of cognitive capabilities as well. You can perform a great shot or a great tackle, great movement, but if you don't do it at the right time and in the right context, then it'll be ineffective. So yes, we know that a successful performance relies on skill execution, but it's the strategical element that goes with it that creates this all-round good effort. So before you analyse your sport performance, you need to know what you're looking out for, basically. You need to know what the core skills, what the specific skills are in your sport, so that when you do start to analyse your own performance, you can be picking out the right things, not just talking aimlessly about your general movements. And what I'm going to be showing you is where you can find almost a list of the skills that you're going to be assessed and judged on in your performance assessment, so we can use that list in your PAP to then guide your own performance analysis as well. So first of all, you need to know what sports are permitted in your school. So before we go into the details of skills and strategies, you need to get clear on what sport it is that you're going to be pursuing. Now, this might be prescribed by your school. You might be given the flexibility to go off and choose your own, but you need to make sure that you've got access to appropriate facilities to display your performance or to showcase your performance in a close to competitive environment. Okay, because you need to evidence yourself in a performance and competitive environment so that you can analyze it. It won't be the best PAP if you just rely on isolated drills or conditioned practices, because hopefully, as you know from playing some level of competitive sport, it's a completely different ball game. Excuse the pun. It's a completely different approach to do it under pressure or on the training ground. So make sure that you've got access to the facilities, the equipment, the timings, the players, to be able to host a semi-competitive, at least, example of your sport. And then for your PAP, there must also be an alternative category. So it needs to be delineated. Okay, you can't choose the same activity that you're going to be using for your performance assessment. You can't use the same one or even a similar one in your PAP. So make sure when you do get clear on what it is you're going to be performing and analysing and then training for, it needs to be in a different context. Okay, once you've got that nailed down, then we can start to look at identifying what makes performance in your chosen sport, even what makes a successful performance successful. And like I was saying, that list of skills and techniques you can find in the LCPE specification from the performance assessment unit. Okay, either you can either search this into Google, or there's a link to it in either this lesson or one of the following ones. You can find that specification, find that list, find your sport, your chosen activity, and there is a list of core skills, specific skills, strategies. There's a list of what the assessors and the teachers are going to be looking for in your performance. So start with that. Now, if you know what's going to be judged, you can start judging your own performance using the same criteria. And if you can find weaknesses aligned with assessment criteria, and then you make performance goals based on those, and you train to get better at them, well, you're obviously going to improve in your overall assessment as well. So you can also add to this with your own individual research. You can begin to look ahead to different governing bodies or different fitness training sessions. You can look ahead to coaching programs. Fill your head with a little bit of knowledge around the activity that you're choosing to pursue. Because the more understanding you have of what makes a good performance great, then you're going to be able to start using that language when analysing your own performances. So I've given you an example here, and the first one is core skills in rugby union. And from the specification, they were handling, tackling, ball retention, and running in possession. Now you'll be able to find not a similar list, but you'll be able to find a similar number and broadness of skills or techniques in the specification for your physical activity. But then what we're going to do is then unpack these a little bit more into some more specific skills. So, like I just said, these are fairly broad. But in order to be effective in competition, we need to have these fundamentals locked down. We need to be good at these four things. So when you are, doing your performance analysis for your PAP and then planning your training program, you need to make sure that at least some of your performance goals, if not most of them, if not all of them, relate to one or all of these fundamental skills. Because if you can get better at 1, 2, 3, or even 4 of these, then obviously your overall performance is going to benefit as well. So like I just said, they were the core skills, as you can see on the left there. But we do have specific skills in rugby because handling, that doesn't summarise all of the different skills that you need for the game of rugby. So what I've done is then unpack that into different variants of it. So some more specific versions of handling demonstrations. So passing, receiving, two very different skills, both of which require handling capabilities, but one is to be able to direct the ball at force, the other is to be able to react and respond to a direction and absorb force. Almost the opposite of each other. It could be a long pass, short pass, when you're at the back of a ruck, a stationary pass, a scrum half. Or are you going to be moving? Are you moving slowly into a tackle? Are you moving during a tackle? Are you offloading? All of these different specific skills all fall under the category of handling. Now, if I'd have stopped at just these 4 here and based my analysis and goal setting on those 4 alone, I wouldn't get anywhere near the same detail than as I would have done here with using my specific skill list as well. So your job, and I'm going to tell you about the activity in a second, your job is to not only find the core fundamental skills, but then unpack them into the more specific variants of them. So doing your own little bit of research, watch some game footage, look at some coaching programs, have a little brainstorm, discuss with a partner about all of the different things that come under some of those under those different techniques. What I was going to say was like tackling. Is every tackle the same? Now that could be a question to ask yourself. If you're doing, let's say, hockey or lacrosse, is every pass the same? No. So how do they differ? Write those down. The last part of sort of identifying skills in sport is this idea of grading. Because it's one thing to witness or observe a skill, but it's another thing to then pass comment, okay, to actually put an opinion on it. Is it low quality? Is it high quality? Well, how do we actually differentiate between a good performance, a great performance, and a world-class performance? Well, a lot of it comes down to this language. Now, if you've covered it in your theory, you would have come across this phrase ace face before, where we've got words like aesthetic, consistent, economical, efficient. These different descriptors, these adjectives that describe almost the quality of a movement. So in a second, when I tell you about the activity, what you'll need to try and do is not only state what skills exist in your sport, and not only unpack some more specific variants of it, but also include, what would you like to see? How would you describe the best example of that skill being executed? Looking at ball retention there. So a ball retention during a maul, what would that look like? If you're watching the best performer ever, well, I'm looking for, first of all, the ball to be safe, not to be fumbled or lost forward. I'm looking for an offload opportunity. Is it being held in a position where it's accessible by all of the teammates? It's protected from the opposition, but it's accessible to the scrum half, who can at any moment offload and then away we go. An average maul would protect the ball, but it wouldn't really be that accessible. So how would you differentiate between a good and a great performance? What sort of language and adjectives can you put into there? Another example, we've got soccer. Now, I'm not going to go through step by step. These are just all of them on one page for you. So again, look at those basic core skills. Passing, dribbling, shooting, heading, tackling. Not too dissimilar to rugby just then. We've got 5 core skills, but then I've unpacked them. Are all headers the same? No. How are they different? Well, some of them are defensive. Some of them I'm trying to score. Some of them I'm contesting with a defender or an attacker. Sometimes I'm trying to absorb some force and just lay it off to one of my teammates. They're different. Okay, how could I grade them differently? What are some of these descriptive words that describe how movements are different when completing these different skills? Accuracy, speed, consistency. Let's just take that word accuracy there. And if I'm to analyse or grade some dribbling skills, right, both feet dribbling. Okay, if I was watching a performer, I want to check that they can accurately place both feet onto the ball and they can consistently keep the ball near to them, within one touch, we could say. So I've used those 2 words, accuracy and consistency, to describe a high quality version of one of the specific skills. So your activity. The activity is obviously on the sheet attached to this lesson within the portal. And what you'll need to do is, with this table, first of all, identify your activity. So what is it that you've chosen to pursue? You can whack that under or on top of the line, even just fill in a blank. Then complete the 3 columns. And you'll notice you've got core skills, specific skills, and then the quality description, that grading language. And I've put about 4 tables in, but don't be afraid to go for 5 or 6 if you look on the specification. There's more core skills for your activity. But unpack those core ones, that middle point there. Input those specific skills. Ask yourself, are all of the core skills, whenever I perform them, are they the exact same every time? Probably not. So how do they differ? And then in the end column, the quality descriptor. Use that language that you can use to describe differences in different levels of performance. So we're going to move on to our second point. So looking at the overview there, we've done identifying skills in your chosen sport. We're now going to look at strategies. Now, a strategy is it's almost when they choose to execute, or how they choose to execute a skill. And it involves a collection of decisions, just looking here. It involves a collection of decisions that are made with one reason, basically, to increase this chance of success, to increase overall accomplishment. Now, it might be that in some scenarios, it's damage limitation. Now, we're losing 2-0. Do we go all out to try and get a 2-2 draw against top of the table, or do we sit back and defend and feel good about ourselves because losing 2-0 was better than losing 5-0 like the majority of our competitors did? So applying strategies, making decisions which influence how and when skills are executed. Why? To bring about more success, to align ourselves with our goals more so. And like skills, just from that last point there are broader categories. And these could be offense, defense, conservative, aggressive. Okay, just 4 different ideas. Now within that, again, you'll get different, more specific strategies, more specific decisions that can be tweaked or changed or implemented at different times in slightly different ways. They're obviously going to differ from sport to sport, I mean, you can have an offensive tennis strategy and an offensive basketball strategy. They'll be completely different on paper because they're different sports. And then within tennis, you can have multiple offensive strategies, different ways that you can apply extra pressure onto your opponent to, try and benefit. So there will be different decisions in each of these strategies. So we now need to do a similar sort of process to identify the strategies in your physical activity. So one example, okay, this is sort of how you can be thinking now. Zone defense. So first of all, it's a defensive strategy. Okay, so it's trying to limit the amount of scoring our opponents can do. And for basketball, or for, I suppose most invasion games, we can play zone defense. Defenders engage when an attacker enters their designated area, opposed to tracking one man or one person. So defenders are making the decision to only pick up opponents in their area. They're making that choice. They're choosing when to track, when to tackle, when to intercept. They're manipulating their skill execution based on a thought and decision and strategy. Now, they must make good decisions in order for this strategy to work. Some examples of making good decisions could be around communication. Are you calling over to your teammate when you watch someone go into their zone? Are you remembering to do that? Have you practiced this strategy enough to be able to make all of the right decisions at the right times? So what I want you to do now, okay, after you've obviously done activity 1, hopefully you've paused that video and gone away and done that. Activity 2 is now the next grid down, where I'd like you to ideally discuss different strategies with the people around you. If you're by yourself, then you can research some of these strategies online. Have a little think. In your choice or in your chosen physical activity, what are some decisions top performers have made? Or strategies that you've used before to try and bring about more success in your performance? And then when you do think of them, jot them down or briefly describe them in the left-hand column underneath the strategy. And on the right-hand side, again, using those quality descriptors, that grading language, what would good execution look like? So with zone defense, from that example just then, a good zone defense is good communication. People stick rigidly to their zone. People are very observant, and they quickly respond to an attacker who comes into their zone. Speed of response, reaction time. So identify the strategies and then describe what successful execution of that strategy would then look like. So if you haven't already, pause and do activity 1 and activity 2. Okay, they're sort of separate and they sort of run by themselves. If you're sticking with us, we're going to move on. So, overview, third part now, we're going to be looking at the impact of physiological and psychological factors on skill. Now, put here on the screen, Fitz and Posner. Now, these are two names, two people, two psychologists that devised this way, and you'll learn about this in your theory, devised a way of comparing different learning stages. And we've got 3 different levels. We've got novice, intermediate, expert, beginner, all the way up to elite. And they termed them as cognitive stage performer, associative stage, and autonomous stage. Okay, cognitive because they still spend a lot of time up in their head. Lots of brain work goes into thinking about how they have to move and respond. Associative means that someone is beginning to associate what they've done before and what they've done well before with what the sporting scenario looks like at the moment. Can they use some of their previous experience to inform future decisions? And as they begin to associate with what they need to do in particular contexts, they reach this stage. It becomes a little bit easier, a little bit better, a little bit quicker. Autonomous almost comes from that word autonomy, automatic. They can perform this sport almost in their sleep at a certain level. It becomes easy, it becomes fluent. They can be thinking about 3, 4, 5 steps ahead rather than the thing that's happening right here, right now. Think of a soccer player. If that ball's coming down, a cognitive stage performer is thinking, right, how do I angle my chest to try and bring this ball down? An associative person is making an all right technique and they're thinking 100% on controlling this ball down. The autonomous performer is they've seen the ball and they're already thinking about what touch they're going to play with their foot. Are they going to nudge it forwards and then cross it in, or are they going to bring it down and then have a shot? They're thinking one step ahead. They've already worked out how to bring that ball down without even thinking about it. So 3 different levels. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you've got an understanding behind what is it about their bodies and their brains that put people at different levels, when it comes to you analysing your own performance, you'll be able to see what level you're at. And you'll be able to use this sort of language. So when analysing your evidence of your performance at the start of your PAP, you can look, okay, well, it looks like I'm thinking quite slowly there. My performance is quite jittery because I haven't made my mind up of what I'm doing. But for some of you, or maybe at the end of your PAP, actually, I just took a look before I received the pass. That suggests that I was already thinking about who I was going to be playing the ball to. That suggests I wasn't thinking so much about receiving the pass. I must have moved up these levels a little bit. So what we're going to do is look at some ways physiology and psychology can differ and how you can drop some of these terms sort of in conjunction with your grading language that we've just been doing. Things like accurately, things like consistently, things like efficiency, economically. So some physiological attributes that can determine people's level, strength. So watching a performance, are you consistently strong in a rugby tackle? Yes, well, you're probably high level. If you are occasionally strong, but more often than not get muscled off the ball, you're probably not a very good defender. In basketball, football, netball, defending your space. Speed, height, that one you can't really change, but it might make a big difference to certain sports. Body composition. Are you lean? Very low fat mass? Have you got more muscle mass? If so, that probably lends itself to certain sporting situations. Your physiological attributes can help you perform at a higher level or a lower level in different situations. Power, flexibility. Think of some others. Not right now, but in the next or the last activity, where we're going to be tying all of this together and creating an observation checklist for you to make, to print off, and then to take, to then watch and analyse your performance. You're going to have a checklist, and you can start to analyse some of these physiological attributes of yourself to see if they're low or high quality. Some psychological ones. Focus. When watching your performance back, are you talking to your teammates? Or are you 100% in the zone? Not distracted by anything else? Are you reacting quickly? Are you only taking the information that matters? Or are you reacting to the wrong things? Are you tracking the wrong players? Decision making. Are you sticking to a strategy? Are you making your mind up and acting on that one thing straight away? Or can you see yourself trying one thing and then you try another thing and it's all a little bit jerky? Have you got creativity? Are you able to think outside the box in your performance? So you've filmed some of your performance, you're analysing it. Can you see yourself making things up on the spot? Are you outwitting the people that you're performing with? Just applying this to athletics. Think of it as Dick Fosbury, the first person to do a Fosbury flop over the high jump. That's creative. Before that, people were running, jumping, and going over tummy first, or scissor kicks. He was one of the first, no, I think he was the first, to actually successfully go over backwards, shoulder first, tummy up to the sky. That's creativity. Looking at a problem, coming up with a way of solving it that the defender or your opponent might not have thought of. So another thing that you can do, you've got obviously skill identification, strategical identification, grading language. Those are adjectives that you can use to describe how well you're performing or moving. You've then got physiological and psychological attributes that you can refer to. Now, a good exercise will be to just think about how they might be different for those three different levels. So there's three different pictures here. The one on the left is autonomous level, elite, pro. In the middle, we've got someone who probably plays for fun fairly regularly. They've got an idea of what they need to do. They can perform to adequate standard. And then on the right-hand side, we've got youth basketball players, novices. They haven't spent years. They haven't got the hours of experience. So they're always thinking about how to respond in every single situation. So not right now, but when you go into your third activity, come back to this PowerPoint and ask yourself, how might the physiology of these performers differ? How might the psychology of these performers differ? We've just got some lists here. Let's just take here, let's take strength and speed and focus and reaction time. Well, strength and speed. Well, our autonomous performer has spent hours, most likely, in the gym, training, weight training, following a periodized training program, enhancing their component of fitness, speed and strength. As a result, they can execute skills at a faster rate in a shorter amount of time, at higher heights. Obviously, they're going to be better than the cognitive learners, the children, because they haven't got the same levels of strength or speed. They haven't got those physiological attributes to be able to execute the skills as quickly, as accurately, as powerfully. So obviously there's going to be a difference between the quality of their performance. Psychologically, focus and reaction time. Well, look at those elite performers. Look at the associative performer. They both look focused on what's going on around them. They've got good body position. They obviously know where the defender is and where they are. The children, on the other hand, look like they're just laughing. They're all going for the ball. There's no appropriate body position. They're not thinking ahead of protecting the ball or boxing out, creating space to then jump and land into. And obviously, reaction times, that builds on having this bank of experience behind you so that you can filter out what is important and what's not important, and you can respond faster to the unfolding environment. An example for rugby as well. Think about strategically, how might it look differently between cognitive level over on our left and all the way up to autonomous on the right-hand side. Children playing rugby, they probably get the ball, run, and avoid anyone because they're used to playing it or tag or stuck in the mud, evading people. Whereas as we start to come up through the different levels of learning, the strategy is probably more you run straight into contact. You keep that ball safe, you don't run away from your teammates. So if you start running around like some of the children probably do, well, there's no one backing you up for the ruck that's probably about to fall. So what you'll need to do in activity 3 is come up with this personal skill identification and assessment grid. How you're going to do that, obviously there's a template there for you to use, but if you want to create your own, then by all means. But you need to come up with this list of core and specific skills that you're going to be looking for when watching your performance back. So you capture the evidence, you then sit down with this checklist and you watch back your performance and you're looking for and judging a list of core skills. So you need to get those right first. Then you need to identify some of the common strategies from your sport. Attacking, defending, offensive, defensive, conservative, aggressive. Get specific, unpack them, describe what decisions you have to make, when, what's the intended outcome. And you need to produce a grading system. Now this is probably the most important part. And in the top section, you can just about see there the different colours. I've sort of written in the example for number 1, using these adjectives. these grading and assessment language that we've looked at, combining that with psychological and physiological factors and characteristics, create the grading system that you can now use. So what does, on average, number one, poor quality look like? Is it weak or is it strong? Is it slow or is it fast? Accurate or inaccurate? Focused, unfocused? Get clear on what it is that you're going to be looking for in your performance analysis. Get grading system sorted, and then that means in your checklist, you can just go 1, 3, 4, 5, 2. You can then grade it really quickly while you're watching. Which brings us to the end. So I hope now you are able to identify the characteristics of a skill performance in your activity. The same for strategy. So you can identify skills and strategies. And lastly, you should now be able to identify the psychological and physiological attributes which you can use to inform your grading. So you can now analyze your own performance, your skills and your strategies, and pass comment on, was it good, was it bad, was it average, what did it look like? And then you've got an informed decision to then go off and build your performance goals from. So I hope you found that useful. Obviously the activity sheets are within this lesson, in this learning zone within the portal. So download those, print them off, and you can work on them either hard copy or download them locally, and then you can edit them for an electronic copy. But yeah, hope that helped, and obviously move on to the next lesson when you are ready, and we're going to be looking at the next section of Learning Zone 1, the Physical Activity Project. Hope to see you again soon.